Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Brown People Problems, where we chat about experiences and issues specific to brown folks around the world. And welcome back to another episode. Today we're talking about 3 ways culture impacts your beliefs about money. Now, personal finance and investing is an area that's been a massive blind spot for me for my entire life, pretty much up until my late 20s. But since then, it's become a bit of a personal project of mine to be financially literate and more informed. Something that I noticed come up for me a lot on this journey and still does sometimes, that a lot of you may also feel, is just this sense of inadequacy or feeling dumb or feeling less than because we don't understand a lot of the financial terms or we don't know so much about finances. And I never stopped to explore how my culture, my cultural learning, my gender socialization, how that intersects with what I believe about money and just what I've been taught about money. And, some other privileges that other people may have that may make it more likely for them to engage in this learning. So hopefully for today's episode, we can scratch the surface a little bit and get you thinking a little bit about 3 different ways your culture impacts your understanding of money. And so I've decided to make this little series about brown folks and money. Why? Because when you have all that you need, build a bigger table, not a higher fence. All right, so I'm going to share a few books that have been helpful for me in just drafting information for this little series here on this podcast, but also that have been helpful for me in just my own learning around finances. Of course, I'm not a financial advisor, so please bear that in mind, and in no shape or form are we going to be exchanging financial tips here, but the purpose of this little series is to just get you reflecting on how your relationship with money has been formed, because it hasn't been formed in a vacuum. So these are 3 books that I recommend to everyone, and hopefully you might find some value in them as well. First up, I have The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. This is a book that is universally loved. It's not culture specific or anything. It's a more kind of universal truths around how our psyche impacts our beliefs about money. This is a really great book to look into if you're kind of sort of starting out in unpacking what is your relationship with money like. The second book that is like my holy grail is Girls That Invest by Simran Kaur. This book is phenomenal. I have been gifting it to all the ladies in my life in the last year since I came across this book. And this book has not just like a really lovely way to explain financial literacy, but it has such a huge focus on minorities, people of color, and unpacking and understanding our experiences that creates a lot of financial disparity for us. And the third book that is also very informative is Financial Feminist by Tori Dunlop. It's about overcoming the patriarchy's bullshit to master your money and build a life that you love. Again, a very intersectional feminist perspective on how your beliefs about money are shaped. And what I liked about this book a lot more was that it had a lot more reflection questions and exercises to help you actively engage with the content that you're reading. All right, so 3 ways culture impacts our beliefs about money. Now, these 3 I have gathered from a lot of my own reading around personal finance and wealth building, as well as some of my own reflection on this journey, and hopefully some of it resonates with you. Okay, so number 1, the first truth here that I think we need to talk about a little bit more is how racial disparities exist, and race has a direct impact on income levels. Now, we have a lot of statistical data that really shows that racial minorities like African Americans, Black Canadians, Hispanics, and the indigenous peoples tend to definitely have lower average incomes compared to their white counterparts. Now, there's many different reasons for this income gap, but it is also a reflection of unequal access to quality education, unequal access to job opportunities, reduction in privilege, and just straight up discriminatory practices in the larger labor market. The perfect example of this is I'm not going to take credit for this because I didn't come up with this, but I saw this somewhere on social media where someone was saying how not everyone has the same 24 hours in the day. If you think about someone from a higher socioeconomic status, their 24 hours in the day look really different in the sense that they might have a cook to make their meals. They may have a cleaner come in and clean their space. They may have a tutor come in and tutor their kids. And so they have a lot more disposable time to work on wealth building and whatever personal development versus someone from, say, like a racial background, from a traditionally marginalized group, and maybe from like an immigrant background. You don't have the luxury of money to hire a tutor for your kids or a cleaner to come in or a cook to come in every day. So your 24 hours are actually going towards meeting your basic needs for survival, and therefore you have much less time that is disposable towards some of these other pursuits. So this is something that we should keep in mind. These texts also talk about how wealth is distinct from income. So income is obviously the money that you make from your job, but wealth also represents accumulated assets and financial security. Immigrant folks in general, we don't have much generational wealth because we're either like immigrants or first generation. So here's also where racial disparity is really relevant. If you don't have generational wealth in your family, if you don't have accumulated assets, like say like different number of homes or a lot of financial security, of course that is going to impact how financially secure or insecure you feel and how that influences how you view money. A lot of these marginalized communities, like brown folks, who are also immigrants, can definitely relate to how your immigration experience may create a scarcity mindset, right? So if you move to a different part of the world, and you recall your parents counting every single dollar, or every single cent and where it was going, that can really create a scarcity mindset. Obviously not to anybody's fault. This is part and parcel of an immigrant experience. You have to pinch pennies. However, that can really create the sense of scarcity mindset as opposed to abundance mindset. And we know we have a number of studies that really show us that the median wealth of white households is several times higher than those of Black or Hispanic or other marginalized groups in the United States. So I think holding this awareness for yourself, if you come from a marginalized group, if you come from an immigrant family, to really hold that as well, that can really impact the opportunities presented to you, your parents and your family's beliefs around money, and what you've been told on what matters when it comes to money. Okay, so while the first way here that we talked about is more applicable to marginalized groups and brown folks in the western part of the world or those who have immigrated, the second truth that we're going to talk about, I feel, is more universally applicable. Obviously, there's a lot of intergroup variability, but if we zoom out and we look at it as a whole, let's talk about gender differences and how gender differences really, really do exist in the brown community, like with anything else. When we talk about gender differences, we need to talk about how boys and girls in the brown community, and many other communities, but in the brown communities, are raised very differently and to value different things. And again, there is so much variability, so forgive me for making a bit of a generalization, but we have a ton of research around, for example, toys that tells us how boys and girls are socialized so differently. So I'm going to share a blurb from the Financial Feminist. Here she talks about how there's studies that show that beginning in childhood, boys are typically given toys that teach innovation, creativity, and self-reliance. This includes things like Lego, trucks, things that are basically there to build and create. And what are girls given? Girls are given dolls, easy to bake ovens, bridal veils, Before we can even speak, we're told that our value to society is not our own ingenuity, but rather how we can serve and belong to others. A literal child is given another child to caretake. So think of dolls and those like infant dolls that we see a lot of girls playing with. There was a study done about children's toys by a psychology professor, Judith Blakemore, and she found that girls' toys were associated with physical attractiveness, nurturing, and domestic skill, whereas boys' toys were rated as violent, competitive, exciting, and somewhat dangerous. So for my brown folks listening, I want you to maybe reflect on what types of toys did you grow up with? I, for one, recall having a lot of dolls and a lot of puzzles, but certainly a lot of dolls. Again, these toys that subliminally put us into these roles of caregivers and nurturers, whereas boys are typically given cars and Lego sets and building blocks and all of that to play with that exercises the innovative part of their brain. Another good point that this author makes is that we assign those like gender roles to very specific kinds of work. So for example, nurturing is associated with like nursing or like, you know, caregiving roles. And then we pay people who do these jobs less than people who do other work. So in our capitalist society, this conditioned tendency towards caregiving sadly punishes us financially. Also, I find that women are often taught that wanting money is evil, or that money can buy happiness. And that's something that I definitely held to be really true going into my journey with personal finance. And anyone listening to this, feel free to pause and reflect here or comment below. But it really took me some time to understand that wanting money is not evil. As women, a lot of us are socialized to really value altruism. We're really taught that our labor should be free or labor should be poorly compensated, and then there's somehow some nobility in that, you know? So if we have to charge other people, we have to now justify not only how it will help us, but how it will actually help others. When we know that there's no altruistic benefit to be had in poverty. We have a lot of studies about brains on poverty that actually show that lack of resources negatively affect our cognition, negatively affects our stress levels, and our decision making. Whereas higher incomes and more wealth is generated with higher well-being, typically. Why? Not because money can buy you happiness, but what money can buy you is the ability to rest, the ability to nourish your body with quality foods, the ability to afford a nice gym membership, and the freedom to leave bad situations. That's what money can buy. It can buy stability and choice, and that often equates to a sense of happiness. According to one study, majority of money habits are actually formed by age 7. That's like second grade, I think. And this is why we talk about toys, right? So much, because how boys and girls are socialized and what they're taught to value is going to have an impact on not just the kind of jobs that they go on to do, but if girls are always socialized to value altruism over other things, then they're not going to be able to say ask for fair wages, or they're not going to be able to feel confident in striving for a financially lucrative role for this like guilt that's going to come up for them. And the difference isn't just in how we're socialized. Gender differences exist systemically as well. I believe it wasn't up until the 1970s when a woman in the United States, so not in any other part of the world, but in the US, could open a bank account in her name. So until the 1970s, a woman could not open a bank account just in her own name. She needed a male cosigner. Women couldn't start businesses just in their own name. They needed a male cosigner. And this is a systemic limitation that is, of course, going to stop a woman from building wealth and changing their relationship with money. I believe the same goes for women looking for mortgages as well. There's another gender difference that I have personally also noticed. Is a lot of financial advice that's targeted towards women is focused on helping women spend less. Whereas financial advice geared towards men typically tends to be around helping them make more money and growing their wealth. And this general sentiment seems to be that, oh, women, you're not rich because you spend frivolously. And this really creates this like culture of shame, because women have been marketed to for a really long time. Like we are targeted like body image ads and everything from a very, very young age, especially in the larger brown communities. I think the general narrative a lot of the times can be that, oh, the girls are just not smart with money, or women are not smart with money. Women spend frivolously. Even if it is true, it's no wonder, because women have missed out on thousands and thousands and thousands of years of financial discourse, because fathers typically pass on financial learnings to their sons, who pass it on to their sons, who pass it on to their sons. And so women have been really removed from this picture. In her book, Girls That Invest, Simran Kaur really talks about how brown women have actually always known the value of money. It's quite traditional and quite common in the brown community for moms to pass on gold to their daughters. So mothers would collect gold jewelry as like a hedge for inflation, and then they would pass it down to their daughters to keep, because gold is a valued commodity and the daughters can liquidate it whenever they need cash. So women have always understood the value of money and the importance of money, just not in the sense that maybe is more widely understood, because brown women have just had to only invest in commodities that were available to them, and not every commodity was available to them. Gold was available to them. Education about financial stocks and learning, not so much. It's really interesting. There's a study from 2021 where they looked at how visual content in articles informs the narrative around social representation. So they found that female articles targeting women, finance articles that were targeting women, showed photos of women smiling next to a piggy bank, displaying a childlike concept of money. In fact, women were nearly 4 times as likely to be depicted like children compared to men. Yet men were shown in suits, making financial deals, or having multiple screens in front of them. This study also shows us that men were more likely to be shown holding bills, while women were more likely to be pictured with pennies in their hands. At the surface level, this may not seem like such a big deal to some people, but I think what you have to realize is, after years and years of consuming content and hearing a larger narrative around women in your home and in your culture that tells you that money is too hard to grasp, or, girls are not good at math, you just start believing that this whole concept of investing and financial literacy is too hard. And you start believing that women are just inherently bad with money, or we're just not interested in our financial futures, which is why so many brown women have absolutely no idea what's going on with their finances, because they let their husband do everything, because maybe the concept of it feels too intimidating. All right, and the truth number 3 in how culture impacts our relationship with money is the fact that we make our decisions basically on how we think the world works, which is informed by a lot of our cultural beliefs and cultural perceptions. Because when it comes to money, perception holds more power than facts. And this is why I really love The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, because it really talks about how, more often than not, it's not that you maybe don't know how to invest money. Even when you overcome that you know the know-how, it's how you perceive money to be. I have met a number of people actually who are in the finance world but don't invest their money because they have such fear around losing money. So much of our perception, right, comes from what we pick up in our cultures, what we pick up in our communities, what we pick up in our homes even. And this is where, again, I come back to the immigrant family, right? So imagine a brown immigrant family where the parents are working odd jobs to make ends meet. And they don't have the privilege of giving their children like pocket money or pin money like their white counterparts, because these are parents who are working like labor jobs and they're literally counting every single dollar and penny and cent that's coming in. And as a child, when you don't get, say, pocket money or pin money, and you're not basically given any type of like control or freedom over money, as you grow up, you may develop this scarcity around money. You may develop this insecurity around money. You may actually become like hyper, like financially like focused and consumed because you didn't have so much of it growing up. Or you may be really bad at managing your money because you were never taught how to. You were just taught the money needs to just be guarded very closely. Because what research shows us and what the psychology of money is that what we have experienced is more compelling when it comes to making money decisions. So fear and uncertainty are more compelling. Some questions that can be helpful to reflect on as you kind of think about what your perception is around money that comes from culture. It can be helpful to think about, how do others in your family respond to financial gains and losses? So is there an absence of a celebration? Is there even an absence of like disclosure when someone gets promotion? Or are they just, they're dismissive of it, it's no big deal? Is there a lot of financial secrecy in your home between siblings or between even parents? Do you know or not know how much your sibling makes? What types of investments do they have? Another thing that can be helpful to think about is, what are some familial values and beliefs that are held in your home about money? Again, is money this like sacred thing that really needs to be guarded very closely and budgeted very, very closely for, and then there can be no error whatsoever? Or is the general attitude towards money more flexible? Were you allowed to make financial mistakes as a child? Did you see your parents make financial mistakes and then resolve those mistakes in a healthy manner? Or did you witness a lot of financial ruin in your family? Were you taught financial literacy and personal finance? If you're a woman listening to this, is this the type of conversation that was available to you? And if your parents did take interest in teaching you this, did you feel that the information was accessible to you? Or did you just feel overwhelmed and you didn't want to engage with it? How did you see the mums and the grandmas in your family manage money? Did you see them manage money at all? Was there ever any conversation around this? Because our relationship with money impacts our decisions more than what we know to be true about finances. We know that if we invest in an ETF and we buy and hold for several years, that money is going to multiply. That intellectual understanding is different than the fear and uncertainty around investing. And like everything, fear and uncertainty is not formed in a vacuum. It is formed in relation to our homes, our culture, and our gender socialization. Because the thing with making money is that we know that it requires risks, it requires being optimistic, and it requires putting yourself out there. Now, taking risks, being optimistic, and putting yourself out there. These are three qualities that can be learned later in life for sure, but the foundations of these qualities come from, again, our family dynamics and our cultural dynamics. And to really drive this point home, economists have also found that individual investors' willingness to bear risk depends on their personal history, not their financial education, their personal history. And if we really take this into account with the brown population, with immigration, with intergenerational trauma, there's so many layers to this. So to recap, 3 ways that culture impacts our beliefs about money. 1 is that racial disparities do exist that create individual and systemic differences. Gender differences exist that dictate how we socialize boys versus girls. And 3rd is that our relationship with money affects our decisions more than what we know to be true about finances. Again, just a bit of an introduction on brown people and money. If you're looking forward to this series, let me know. Check out any of those books that I have mentioned. They're actually great. And thank you so much for engaging today. I really appreciate you being here. Hopefully you will join me in more conversations that are to come around money. If you enjoyed this episode, please give me a thumbs up, and I will see you in my next one. Stay tuned for our disclaimer, everyone. The guest and the host of Brown People Problems do not offer individualized therapeutic or medical advice, and our conversations should not be interpreted as such. This podcast is not a replacement for therapy. This podcast exists for educational purposes only. Please consider your circumstances and engage with the content mindfully.